Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to our 2023 reviews, and today we have the Vancouver Canucks. So Vancouver, they're obviously a team that when you look at them, they're like a 500 team every single year, it feels like. And they're not bad enough to land a high draft pick, but they're also not good enough to make the playoffs. That's kind of the motto that I have for Vancouver, honestly, and that's what I've had for the past couple of years. They went 38, 37, and 7 for 83 points. They have a .506 win percentage. They scored 276 goals and let in 298, and they were a minus 22 overall. They were 19, 20, and 2 at home, and they were 19, 17, and 5 on the road. So actually, heading into this year, I had a lot of optimism for Vancouver. I really did think after last season and, the positivity they showed and the way they played towards the end of last year really made me think that, they actually could have a shot here at making the playoffs, and then that fell through. They had a really bad start to the season, as we'll mention in our month-by-month in a second here. It just overall was not a good season for Vancouver until the very end, which seems like it is that every single year. Bruce Boudreau, their head coach, was fired. That is something to keep in mind there. Of course, we saw the management changes of Benning and Travis Green last year. Now we're seeing Bruce Boudreau get fired this year. And it sucks. It wasn't really his fault that they were playing bad. But they did name Rick Tocchet as the brand new head coach, which under him, they played like they did with Bruce Boudreau. So, gotta think that they're going down that path once again, which is not surprising at all. But yeah, just keeps on making management changes when management is not the problem per se. Month-by-month record, they started off with a 2-5-2 record in October. It was a not a good month. They went like 0-5 to start the year. Then they won a game. Then they lost more. November 7-6-1, not a bad month, just not the good enough that they wanted it to be. Next month 7-6-0. So they were playing like okay. They were close to the playoff line, but there were points there where you were like, man, this team is not good. Then they went 4-9-0 in January, which is of course the month where Bruce Boudreau was fired. And that plays a month, and that was the month that showed me that this team is not good enough. Showed me that they're not good enough this year. When it feels like they are. It feels like they have some of the assets to be really good, but they just can't get over the hump. It's always either the defense or the offense or the goaltending or the coaching. It's always one problem after another. You never deal with all of them. Then they went 4-5-2 in February under Tocchet that first month. Then they went 10-2-2. And this goes to show why Canucks fans get angry at this time of the year, because at that point, heading into March, like let's say you forget about March so far, they're actually not that bad. They have good draft lottery odds. They could have gone a guy like, they could have at least finished in the top 10 or top 10. Definitely. And then you have a 10-2-2 month, and you kind of wonder, well, what the hell? We just literally took ourselves out of the draft lottery race. Then they went 4-3-0 in April. So like they just kept, just whenever they would lose, they would win. Whenever they were supposed to win, they would lose. Whenever they were supposed to lose, they would win. It just has been that for the past 10 or so years in Vancouver. Hasn't been very positive. You look at your leading goal scorers, you have Elias Pettersson, who, even though this season was not very good for Vancouver, he still had a pretty good year. 80 games played, 39 goals, 63 assists for 103 points. I thought Pettersson had a really solid year overall. I thought he played well throughout the long stretches, and despite this team being pretty bad, he still played solid. JT Miller. Miller played 81 games, had 32 goals, 50 assists for 82 points. I thought Miller had a really solid year, but there were obviously those locker room rumors of him being a locker room cancer, and I think they brought Rick Tocchet in to solely help out with him, but as well as that too, help out with the contracts with Connor Garland and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, because those deals are horrendous. But yeah, obviously they mainly brought him in there to help out with Miller and make sure he's not a locker room cancer, especially because he's going to stay with the team for the next 8 or so years. So something to keep in mind. Quinn Hughes, 78 games played, 7 goals, 69 assists, 76 points. Had a really solid offensive season as a defenseman. Sorry. There was obviously going to be those rumors of him going to the Devils. That's going to pop up a lot, but no surprise there. Andrei Kuzmenko. Kuzmenko, of course, this is his first season in the NHL, but he's too old to reach the eligible mark for rookies. He's above the Calder eligible vote there, so he's technically not a rookie, even though he is. Kuzmenko, 81 games played, 39 goals, 35 assists, 74 points. If we're being honest, if he had been like, 23 years old, and he put up these numbers, he would have won the Calder. No question. I don't think it would be a question at all who would win it. Like, with Beniers, there was no question, but with, like, Kuzmenko, too, it's no doubt. Then you got Brock Besser. He's been a trade rumors for a long time, so no surprise here. But 74 games played, 18 goals, 37 assists, 55 points. Besser still had, yet again, a really good season. Struggled a lot there in the beginning and towards the end there. And there were rumors that he would get traded. But Besser, of course, that didn't happen, at least this season. Connor Garland, a player who I loved for many years, had a pretty interesting year. 81 games played, 17 goals, 29 assists, 46 points. I thought he played better this year than in previous years, but Garland, that contract is still not good. And if Vancouver could potentially look at moving it, it isn't a bad idea, even though they've shown before that they just don't move contracts. They just don't do it. Ilya Mikheyev, he was a new acquisition this offseason. 46 games played, 13 goals, 15 assists, 28 points. I thought Mikheyev played all right at points this year, but of course, he was hurt for a lot of it, so that plays a role in why you weren't so good. Dakota Joshua, 79 games played, 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, 54 games played, 2 goals, 20 assists, 22 points. Brutal contract, all I'm going to say about that. He did not have a good year, but he also missed a lot. And then Anthony Beauvillier made the top 10 as a deadline acquisition acquired in that Bo Horvat trade. 33 games played, 9 goals, 11 assists for 20 points. So that is your top 10 scorers overall for Vancouver. Not terrible. You had some solid players in there, but then again, it comes back to that blue line. That blue line keeps getting repetitively brought up, and it just goes to show that they have kind of a weak defense, and their goaltending was not very promising this season. Now, even though Thatcher Demko had a pretty positive year towards the end, the beginning was brutal. 32 games played, 14, and 4, a 3.16 goals against average, and a .901 save percentage. But then again, when you're Vancouver, you're letting in a lot of shots allowed. And I looked at this stat. I can't remember when I was looking at this. I think it might have been when I was looking at goaltending leaders for Vezina Trophy, but I can't remember when I saw this. But Demko had over 1,000 shots faced in 32 games played. That is the most a goalie has faced when playing less than 35 games. So it goes to show there that, like, you know, as a player like him, or as a goalie like him, he played solid in previous years. But like, I feel like his defense, I think part of it is that they just kind of left him out to dry. Now he did face some inner demons too, but you gotta take that into consideration. But Demko could get traded. He's a trade bait player. But I doubt it. I can't see him in another jersey, but I guess it is possible. Goalies can get moved left to right and center. Connor Delia up next, 20 games played, 10, 6, and 2, a 3.28 goals against average, and a .882 save percentage. He was all right this kind of year. I didn't really watch him play that much. And then the final thing we'll bring up is the trades. You got Curtis Lazar to the Devils, kind of just a minor move, got like 1 draft pick back. Luke Schenn to Toronto. Bo Horvat to the Islanders was also another one. But these were the two that I didn't really understand. The Kravtsov deal I can understand more because he's a young player. However, though, he's signed in Russia for next year, so he's not even going to be with the team next year when he's playing. So he'll be in Russia, of course. And then the Filip Hronek deal, that didn't make sense to me. Like, why? Like, actually, if you take that Hronek deal out, they actually had an all right trade deadline. Now you can factor in that Kravtsov left immediately for Russia afterwards, but like without Hronek, like you move him, that's not a bad deadline. You move Schenn for some solid picks. You got a first-round pick back for Horvat. You could build up that prospect pool. And then you make the Hronek deal. Why? Like, if it was another team, like, let's say it was, I don't know, like, even if it was Pittsburgh, I would not have hated that trade because they're a rental and they're much closer to the playoffs than Vancouver was. Or let's say it was like Florida or a team like that. I'm not saying it was possible, but, like, if it was a team that was in the playoffs or closer to the playoffs, then, yeah, I would have been like, that's a good move. But, like, the Hronek move just didn't make sense. If they're looking for next year, I guess, but, like, you would probably rather build up on this young core that really is not that young, to be honest with you. So it really doesn't make sense to me. But, yeah, that is their season overall. We can look into this offseason, which is probably going to be cap hell. It is. Not necessarily this year, but next year, absolutely. They have the 11th overall pick in this year's draft. We'll see who they select. It's a pretty deep draft this year, so I'm expecting somebody interesting. They have 2/3, 3/4, and 1/6. They have some of those picks there as well. So they have some draft picks, but not a lot. And then again, it goes to show that like they'll just trade draft picks like it's nothing. They just keep moving draft picks out, and that's why the future of this team is so weird right now. And that's why like you look at this team and you're like, what? So yeah, UFAs and RFAs. The only UFA you got is Kyle Burrows. He's the only one that I look at. But yeah, Burrows, maybe he doesn't get signed, maybe not. RFAs, Vitaly Kravtsov, Ethan Bear, and Travis Dermott. I would imagine Kravtsov's gone. I mean, there's no question. He's in Russia. Bear, maybe. Dermott, not sure. I'm not really too sure with those guys. But yeah, honestly, it's not cap hell right now, but they have no money right now. Like right now, they have no money. And moving these guys out will help, yes. But you got Pedersen you got to sign next year. So that really is something you got to keep in mind. When you're Vancouver, you got to think that you got to sign Pedersen next year. And if he leaves, this could turn a potentially short-term scenario where they could be good again in a few years to a long-term scenario. So you really got to keep Pedersen in town. He's mentioned that he wants to play in Vancouver, but there's nothing too specific outside of that. But he also wants to win, too. And we saw Eichel say the same thing. So yeah, future players, Jonathan Lekkerimäki, I thought is a hyped-up player, not bad forward that could play next season. Nils Hoglander, I thought I mentioned him here, but he's not really that player anymore that we thought he was going to be. Elias Pettersson there too. Not the forward Pettersson, the defenseman Pettersson. So yeah, they have some okay pieces for the future, but nothing too big. And overall, I'm expecting the same season, the same result out of this team next year. So anyways, let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. Thank you all very much for watching. For all of your supporters, I really do appreciate it. The next one will be, I believe, the Ottawa Senators, and we'll get the Sabres one out there too. We'll finish up all the non-playoff teams, and then we'll look into the playoff teams probably starting next week, hopefully. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Adios.